Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. This is our 21st time we've been here doing this. Unfortunately, we've had to do it. My name is Henry Link. I'm the Chautauqua County American Legion Honor Guard Commander, and I will be the MC for this deal. We will start out with Stan Koski giving a little prayer.
On cover. On this, the anniversary of September 11th, may each of us pause to remember and reflect and renew our country's commitment to the fundamentals of values of inclusion, equality, and diversity. On the morning of September 11th, we were all stunned by the billowing black smoke against the brilliant blue sky, as we mourn the loss of thousands of precious lives. Images and events of that fateful day have left an indelible imprint on our hearts and minds. As we remember that day in sadness, we remember the awe-inspiring unity we all felt, a collective national expression of how Americans can come together across racial, ethnic, class, and geographic lines to both heal and rebuild our nation. Let us reflect on the spirit we felt that day, when we were resolute in the fact that we were all Americans working together with compassion, generosity, and understanding. Let us embrace our collective humanity and the fundamental values of tolerance, diversity shared by our community. Indeed, what makes us Americans is not what we look like or where we come from, but what we stand for and embrace. On this solemn anniversary, let us accept, respect, and honor the sacred worth of all life that inhabits not just this nation, but the entire earth. As we endeavor to move forward, we acknowledge the lessons this tragedy has taught us. Amen.
Thank you, Stanley. We have several guest speakers today. First up will be Kirk Miller. Kirk is the current Chautauqua County American Legion Commander.
Good afternoon. On September 11th, 2001, the sun rose that day just like any other day. Predictions would be for a sunny, warm day, just like September 10th. But by 8:45 a.m., the world as we knew it would be changed forever. Because at that very moment, Al-Qaeda terrorists would fly hijacked commercial airliner into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. This would be followed by another into the second tower. A third would crash into the Pentagon. And the fourth crashed into the rich farmlands of Shanksville, Pennsylvania, after hijackers were subdued by the passengers. The day would become the most tragic day on American soil since the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Here in our little corner of New York, we too were not immune to the consequences of a September morning. It seemed though each person knew someone who was in the path of this malicious act. For me, it was a vibrant, young flight attendant who took an extra shift and fatefully lost her life in the Trade Center crash. Her name was Jean Roguer, and she could always be found every summer at her family cottage in Van Buren Point. Or maybe it was the 343 brother firefighters who ran willfully into a death trap of collapsing concrete to attempt to save even one life. And the closest to me, my cousin, Craig J. Miller, Master Special Agent of the Secret Service, who was in New York to supply logistics for an event that day at the United Nations. Craig was at 7 World Trade Center that morning looking for souvenirs for his family. Within the rubble of Tower 1, they found his duffel bag of gear, and witnesses had placed him in the stairwells, directing victims to the ground floor. Craig was the lone Treasury agent killed in the 9/11 attacks. He was a decorated Army veteran of the Gulf War. In due time, it would be determined that nearly 3,000 people had lost their lives in all 4 plane crashes. On the brink of tragedy, Americans jumped to action. Police officers, firefighters, other first responders, and government employees took the call and rallied to help in any way they could. Along with them were regular citizens. Some of them were passengers of Flight 93 who observed that terrible results would follow if the hijackers were not removed from their task. Some of the passengers devised a quick plan and thwarted an attempt at the plane crashing into any other populated area. These citizens were truly heroes and saved further lives in giving their own. They swarmed into action on a single phrase: "Let's roll." What's not often recalled when we discuss the 9/11 attack is the fact that many of these workers were serving their country for the second time. Many were veterans of the armed forces. Many were also legionnaires. As our country resolve continued, so did the commitment of our military, along with congressional bipartisan agreement on chasing and bringing to justice all of those who were connected to these attacks. This brought great success, and it continues to this day. Further, our workforce has rebuilt what was destroyed. We, as the Chautauqua County American Legion, have stood ready and will forever remember events of September 11th. And in keeping with our traditions, we support our servicemen and women, our country's Constitution, which shows our freedom and values. We are prepared to assist our communities, and most importantly, to assist in quelling any aggression towards our country or its people by keeping the home fires burning. It's so coincidental that this anniversary shares its number with that of the national tally of veteran suicides this year. The American Legion has developed a worldwide campaign to address and reduce that number. Any veteran can ask for help at any American Legion post. Thank you for being here on this 22nd anniversary of the September 11th attacks. God bless you and the United States of America.
Thank you, Kurt. Next, we will have Greg Carlson. He's our Chautauqua County Veterans Director. He does a whale of a job, so thank you.
Good afternoon. 22 years ago today, the course of American history was changed forever. Nearly 3,000 innocent people were killed in an act of cowardice and evil, and it was carried out here on our home soil. It was one of those you remember where you were and what you were doing moments. America lost its innocence on that day. Since World War II, we lived in a cocoon where danger, or at least danger on that scale, didn't touch us here at home. These were things that happened in other far-off places, not here, not to us. It was a day of fear, sadness, and uncertainty I'll never forget. But it was the days and the months after 9/11/2001 that took the fear and uncertainty away. Though the sadness remained, the fear and uncertainty was replaced with American pride and resolve. America rallied. All that were able to make their way to New York City to help if they could, did. And I remember as a young Air Force recruiter at that time, all the men and women of all ages and backgrounds who flooded my office. I remember one particular World War II veteran. He must have been about 80 years old at the time. He was ready to go and do his part. He didn't want some young man with a family to have to be put in harm's way, because he was willing to do it. I remember people stood a little taller and stood a little prouder when the national anthem was played. Our heroes wore badges, whether it be a fireman's badge, policeman's badge, or EMT. We all universally understood the heroism and value of the bravest among us who run into burning buildings and who run towards the gunfire. We unapologetically supported all the men and women who volunteered to serve in the armed forces after 9/11, specifically to ensure that 9/11 would never happen here again. It was a rebirth and one that brought out the best in America. We said then we'd never forget, but sadly, some 22 years later, it seems that some have. America, unfortunately, has never been more divided. What's defined in today's world as heroism is just unrecognizable to me. Culturally, we've turned criminals into victims while turning our backs on those who risk their lives to protect us. And as a consequence, many American cities have become unlivable and crime-infested. Sadly, it seems some have forgotten, though not the patriotic Americans who are here today to remember, but society as a whole. My hope and prayer is that our nation never ever again has to face another 9/11. However, I do pray and hope for the restoration of the national pride I saw lived out in the days and the months following 9/11. As for me personally, I will never change. I still get choked up when the national anthem plays, and all of my heroes wear badges. I still think about the 3,000 countrymen who lost their lives 22 years ago, and the bravest among us who ran into the burning buildings because they believed in something higher than themselves. On behalf of the Chautauqua County Veterans Service Agency and all the county veterans, thank you for being here today to remember them with us. God bless.
Thank you, Greg. Any veteran, and I got to put a plug in for our county director, any veteran that has any issues at all, please, please, please. We have a office in Dunkirk. We have an office in Jamestown. They are paid by us here in Chautauqua County. They're not paid by the VA. They're not paid by the federal government. Their interest is us. Make sure that us, our veterans, get down there and get what they're deserving. Now we have Sheriff Jim Controne say a few words.
Good afternoon. It's truly an honor to be able to be here, to see the crowd that is here. It's something that you're going to hear a lot of common parts of these different speeches from each of us. And it's something I would normally apologize for repeating, but we need to continue to repeat and keep these issues, these concepts at our forefront. Today we remember and honor those who lost their lives 22 years ago, September 11th, 2001. For those of us who are old enough, it is a day that we will never forget and always remember. The events of that day, since the events of that day, what has transpired since that day are forever in our memories. For those who are too young to understand what is happening, or perhaps not even born yet, they will learn through what is taught in a history class, and hopefully through memorials like this one. It's incumbent upon all of us to follow through with the phrase, always remember and never forget. It's truly a small duty when we consider the sacrifices that so many made. President George W. Bush stated that it was one of the worst days in American history that saw some of the bravest acts in American history. In the days and months that followed the attacks, we saw a unified nation, a nation that put its personal differences aside and looked out for each other, a nation committed to peace and freedom, a nation that we love and are honored to live in. We are able to live in freedom because of the sacrifices made by so many who have defended our country while serving in the military, and our many first responders, paid and volunteer, that serve day in and day out to maintain safety and peace in our own backyards. There were nearly 3,000 people killed in the 9/11 attacks, and nearly 2,500 U.S. troops killed in Operation Enduring Freedom. Of the nearly 3,000 killed in 9/11, over 400 were first responders who responded to the attack willingly and willingly put their lives on the line in an effort to save so many trying to escape the danger. While thousands were running from the danger, our first responders were running into the danger, and over 400 first responders made the ultimate sacrifice of their lives. That's 343 firefighters, and over 300 have died since as a result of the aftermath and the smoke and the different diseases that have been caused. There are 8 EMS providers and 72 police officers who perished on 9/11. Some might ask, why would they do this? And some know why they would. Our first responders have a sense of duty and a love of country, community, and fellow man that is strong, that their actions are taken without a second thought. In the Gospel of John, it says, there's no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And this is exactly what the first responders did on September 11th, 2001. Winston Churchill stated, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. The many first responders who gave their life on 9/11, those who perished on the date as well as those who have died or suffered the ill effects of the attacks, made a life that honored and protected their fellow man. Today I encourage each and every one of you to ensure that we never forget the sacrifice and love that was demonstrated on September 11th, 2001. These hero first responders didn't just make the ultimate sacrifice, but they sacrificed daily as they reported to work, often putting their lives on the line for the good of the community. While we must remember the fateful day of September 11th, we need to continue to honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice. And perhaps a great way to do so beyond this memorial and the history lessons is to demonstrate our unity and to make sure to keep involved in our county and our country, keeping them safe. I would propose that a great way to honor those first responders who lost their life is to get involved. Get involved in your community. Get involved in the local fire department or EMS. Get involved in law enforcement to keep our community safe. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, Jim. Next we have PJ Wendell, our Chautauqua County Executive.
thank you, and it truly is an honor to be here today. As Kirk mentioned, 9/11 became very close and personal when you listen to Alan Jackson's words, "Where were you in the world? Stop turning." My quickest one was, I was in a class teaching innocent children. Can't remember if it was 6th or 7th or 8th grade, but it was middle school in the morning, and just could not wrap my head around what I was seeing. And as the devastation went, I received a phone call, and one of our fellow firefighters from Lakewood is here today. They asked if we would form a ladder company to go into New York City. Now, mind you, I was married just 10 days prior to that, so it was the first argument I had when I got home. Packing my bags, I'm going to go to New York. No, you're not. It's the safest place. The towers are down. Well, we learned from history, and as the sheriff said, 300 more people have now perished in the aftermath of 9/11, that it still wasn't the safest place. But it wasn't until about 4 o'clock that afternoon that I got a call that a longtime friend was on that fateful flight. And the sad part about it, that's the flight we see over and over and over again, the second flight that crashed into the World Trade Center. Amy King was full of life, hadn't yet reached her 30th birthday, and took, as Kirk had said, she took an extra shift to be with her then boyfriend to take that flight so they could spend the day together, not knowing that some 40 minutes after their flight would be the end of their lives. The memorials that we pay tribute to are just a small reminder of what those individuals did. And I have to ask, is anyone from Amy's family here today? Because I know for many years Sue was always in attendance. But this local hero shared the sentiments of everyone that fateful afternoon, actually fateful morning. We were united as one country. And as the sheriff said, and so many, the love that poured out on September 11th resounded on September 12th, September 13th, and for many, many months and years to come. But unfortunately, we have gone into that great divide. I was fortunate enough to be trained by some of those men who'd lost their lives, as they were one of the 343 who ran back in. And as the sheriff said, what fitting tribute than to get engaged into the volunteer fire service, EMS, or for young people to be involved in law enforcement. These are the things that those men and women do without even thinking, day in and day out. So on behalf of myself and the residents, I would like to read a proclamation from my office of the County Executive. Whereas on the morning of September 11, 2001, 19 members of the radical Islamic terrorist group Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 planes departing from various locations throughout the United States and used them to carry out coordinated suicide attacks on the World Trade Center in New York City, the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and whereas the flights hijacked on September 11, 2001 included American Airlines Flight 11, American Airlines Flight 77, United Airlines Flight 93, and United Airlines Flight 175. And whereas at 8:46 a.m., hijackers crashed American Airlines Flight 11 into floors 93 through 99 of the World Trade Center in New York City. And whereas at 9:03 a.m., hijackers crashed United Airlines Flight 175 into floors 75 through 85 of the South Tower of the World Trade Center in New York. And whereas at 9:37 a.m., hijackers crashed American Airlines Flight 77 into the western facade of the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and whereas at 9:59 a.m., the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed 56 minutes after impact. And whereas at 10:07 a.m., the 4th plane, United Airlines Flight 93, crashed into a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, after passengers and crew attempted to wrest control from the hijackers. And whereas the heroic actions of the passenger and crew of United Flight 93 prevented the plane from being used in another suicide attack against an unidentified target, undoubtedly saving many lives. And whereas at 10:28 a.m., the North Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed 1 hour and 42 minutes after impact. And whereas as a result of these terrorist attacks, 2,977 Americans lost their lives, including 343 firefighters, 71 law enforcement officers, and 55 military personnel. And whereas exposure to harmful pollutants resulted in thousands of Americans suffering from 9/11 related illnesses, as of 2021, the Justice Department Victims Compensation Fund has acknowledged that more Americans have died of 9/11 related illnesses than during the terrorist attack on that fateful day of September 11th. And whereas on September 18th, 2001, President Bush signed the authorization for use of military force and launched the global war on terror to bring those who orchestrated the September 11th terrorist attacks to justice. And whereas more than 7,000 U.S. soldiers, including 6 from right here in Chautauqua County, and more than 8,000 contractors gave their lives during the global war on terror. And whereas hundreds of thousands of more United States and Allied service members have been wounded in combat or have died indirectly as a result of sustained in the war zones. The U.S. military suicide rate has climbed significantly since 2004, and 4 times as many service members have died by suicide than in combat in the post-9/11 era, signaling a widespread mental health crisis. Now therefore, I, Paul M. Wendell Jr., Chautauqua County Executive, do hereby proclaim Monday, September 11th, 2023, as Patriot Day in Chautauqua County, and I encourage all residents to remember those we lost due to the September 11th terrorist attacks during the global war on terror. In witness whereof, I have hereto set my hand and caused the great seal of the County of Chautauqua to be affixed this 11th day of September 2023. It's not just September 11th we remember these individuals, men and women, but it should be every day that we remember what they gave for us. Thank you.
Thank you, PJ. Next we have Andy Goodell, our New York State Assemblyman.
"9/11 demonstrated both the worst of humanity and the best of humanity. The worst of humanity was on full display when you saw terrorists taking over civilian aircraft with the sole purpose of killing as many people as possible. There's no military objective. Their sole objective was to hurt as many innocent people as possible. How horrific. And you saw the best of humanity when our first responders ran into those buildings in an effort to save as many innocent people as possible. Imagine this for a moment. Instead of walking up 2 flights of stairs or 3 flights of stairs here at the county office building, imagine carrying heavy gear and running up 70 flights of stairs. Not 1, not 2, not 3. 70 flights of stairs. And remember, some of those first responders who are running up the flights of stairs already knew that the other tower had collapsed. That's the best of humanity. Putting your life on the line to save innocent people. And don't forget for one moment the horror of being on one of those top floors, knowing the building was on fire, knowing the elevators were broken and wouldn't work, knowing that the stairwells were collapsed, calling to your loved ones on a cell phone, telling them how much you love them, knowing full well you'd never see them again. That's the horror of 9/11. This memorial is important because you have college students graduating this year who are not alive when we witnessed firsthand 9/11. And it's up to us to remind the future generations that each of us has a choice as we go through life. Are our actions going to reflect on the best of humanity or not? And so I employ all of us to focus on what we can do to demonstrate the best of humanity and to highlight the horrors that occur with the worst of humanity. God bless each of you, and God bless America.
Thank you, Andy. Next, we have Christine McAllister. She's representing Nick Langworthy, our U.S. House of Representatives person.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here today on behalf of Congressman Langworthy. We want to thank County Executive P.J. Wendell and all the members of the American Legion for giving us all this opportunity to come together as a community to honor and to remember the heroes of 9/11. Today, as we reflect on the events that transpired 22 years ago, we remember and hold the nearly 3,000 lives lost in our hearts and minds forever. Even though the pain of September 11th, 2001 may linger, it is our spirits, our communities, and our country which have persevered to this day. As we remember our fallen heroes, we must also lift up our first responders, the thousands of brave men and women who answered the call and ran towards danger, towards burning buildings to save lives. They demonstrated a sense of selflessness and commitment to the community that is truly incredible. Finally, let's remember those brave men and women who honorably defended our country in the global war on terror after that fateful day. It's important to underscore how much we owe those who fought and those who fell while serving this country in Afghanistan, and to those who are still making that sacrifice today. It is not only tradition that calls us to remember this day, it is duty. As Americans, we have a duty to remember and to teach the next generation to defend the ideals that make this country great. We will never forget. May God bless and protect the United States of America and each of you here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Now we have our benediction, our Chautauqua County American Legion chaplain, and the assistant 8th District chaplain, Stan Koski.
God, all that is good, your gracious favor has gathered us today to honor those who serve and protect us and remember those who have given their very selves to this task. We may never take for granted the freedoms we have endowed as our founders proclaimed. They are inalienable rights, divinely imparted and rested in the hands of man. We remember today is far more than terror or fear or the destructions of great buildings. We remember how dedicated mercy and compassion are stronger than steel and concrete, and infinitely more secure than weapons of any type or another. Amen.
Sergeant of the Guard, salute our departed comrades.
I would like to thank everyone for being here today. And I have final remarks. 22 years ago, the United States was attacked. Al Crick, better known as Grumpy, a fellow Legionnaire, decided that we should not forget. In the years to come, we needed to remind everyone that 2,977 people lost their lives right here on American soil. Al was instrumental in organizing this ceremony. Al was instrumental in procuring and placing the granite monument, which is out front here. Because of recent health issues, this is the first 9/11 ceremonies that Al has missed. Keep him in our, I ask everyone to keep him in your prayers, your thoughts and prayers. He's going through a rough time right now, but we'll make it. Thank you very much. That concludes our ceremony.